Hey everyone, Inkwalder here for round 5 of the 90s MTG Webcam League. And first I just want to shout out, I just found this channel that I love for music, Bad Hairline Productions. I'll put it in the comments. They have some epic guitar work on Octopath Traveler 2. Anyway, I'm facing It's Rockford on Blue Painter, so this is my second time facing it in the league so far. And Red Painter has a really good matchup, but Blue Painter has a lot of ways to fight it. So this opening hand, I knew I was against Blue Painter. I've got Karn. So Rockford and I are both not popular, but we both are active in the Painter Discord. So we both sort of knew what was going on. So I've got land, I've got mana. He starts with a Spire and an Expedition map and a Bauble. And he cracks the Bauble to look at my top card, which is Fury, and passes it back. So I know he is on Blue Painter. And what I really should do here is play Mountain and run Nile Spellbomb out, because the Pyroblast should get used to protect Karn, but I just decide here, and it's a very bad play. And this is the example of how you really screw up with the deck, is you have to know what's important in every matchup. And I know my opponent's on Blue Painter, and so he casts Emery, and I Pyroblast it, snap Pyroblast. What is wrong with me? I've got Nile Spellbomb in my hand, and I've got a Fury. I have multiple ways to take care of Emery. He's not doing anything. And on top of it, if I do find a Welder, Emery puts stuff in the graveyard for him. Never counter Emery. So now I cast the Spellbomb and feel like an idiot. Rockford played Urza Saga and then cracked Expedition map. And so he's going to find Ancient Tomb here, which is pretty good at just finding that mana acceleration on a fetch. I didn't know that Blue Painter played map, but that's cool. So he plays the Tomb and then passes back to me. I play City of Traders and I jam Karn. Now, this is the problem, is that I had Pyroblast, and my draw for this turn was Lotus Petal. So I would have absolutely had the mana to cast Karn and protect it that turn. And instead, I countered a target that wasn't going to hurt me and actually might even help me. And so off of Saga, Rockford finds Grindstone. And so as is typical, right, I had Grindstone in my hand, but I'm not going to run, sorry, I had Painter in my hand. I'm not going to run that out until I'm able to play Painter and activate it. Rockford, that shiny card down there, is a Painter, and he names Black to make sure that I can't Pyroblast it. And so he's got Ancient, he had played a second Ancient Tomb, he casts an Emery, and he's got mana to activate the Grindstone. He goes and does it, and I scoop it up. So just an example of how bad play, it doesn't matter how good my matchup is. So on the play, I want Magus and Pithing Needle. I get rid of Painters. I boarded out Opal. I think that's wrong for me because I want black mana for Spellbomb. And so I would say cutting Fable, like I did in round 3, is the correct thing. So I've got Fable, I've got 2 Sagas, and I've got red mana. I also have a Petal. Sorry, it's not shown here, but I do have a Petal. So I have 2 sources of red mana, which means that I can play Welder temporarily. And I have red mana to support it. So that's me playing the Welder off the Petal. So I have Spirit Guide Red Blast in my hand, which is good. And normally I want to try and run the Fable out and smooth my draws. But for this turn, I drew Engineer. And I don't know whether it's right, but he didn't Force of Will the Welder. So I figured he still doesn't have blue mana. He played a Mishra's Bauble and a Grindstone. So I'm like, forget it. He didn't counter the Welder. I'm doing Engineer. So I get Chaos Defiler. And if you haven't seen Welder and Defiler against any permanent-based deck, they absolutely obliterate things. So my record is destroying, I think, 6 permanents in 1 turn against elves. That was really fun. But my mana is a huge problem. I have no red mana. I sided out the Opal, even if I had an artifact, right? I sided out the Opal. So that's definitely precarious. Off of Pithing Needle, off of Saga, I go and fetch Needle because he had played Ancient Tomb, but he didn't activate it. He didn't activate Saga when my Saga went off. So I went and got Needle and named Saga. This basically stops him for one turn from making a construct, which to me, that's value. I did draw a mountain that turn, and so I'm able to cast Fable. So on his turn, his Saga pops, and he sort of went through it quickly, and I actually asked him to back up, because if he gets Pithing Needle here, I'm so screwed. So I needed to respond to the search, and I activate Welder, targeting Needle and Defiler. And so now we're working out the stack. So the search is on the stack, and the Welder is on top of it. Once Welder resolves, then Defiler goes on the stack above the search. And at that point, Rockford can make a construct because Pithing Needle will be in the graveyard. So this is sort of what we're discussing right now. But really, really important that I made that play or the game is over. And he could go get Needle now, but Defiler can just get sacrificed to Goblin Engineer. And so because I have both of them, there's not really anything he can do to protect against it. So Needle would just be a bad take right now. Although I'll say most things, when you have this kind of board presence out, it's going to be pretty hard to tackle it, right? So really what I'm most worried about and why I got rid of the Grindstone with the Defiler. Also, just a quick note. When your Defiler trigger goes on the stack, you do not, there's no targets. So you don't have to tell your opponent what you're targeting until it resolves. So they can't change, they can't react to me saying Grindstone. So I want to get rid of the Grindstone. He goes in, he fetches Haywire Might, and he plays Mox Opal here for green mana and tries to get rid of Defiler, but I remembered why I don't like Might, and it's because it doesn't hit creatures. So I sort of tell him that there isn't a good option for him here. He needed to get rid of the Defiler this turn. So he'd need 2 Needles, one for Welder, one for Engineer. So there isn't really a good name at this point. He needed to be able to counter the Welder or the Engineer. So he baubles me, and I show him Magus, which is okay here. It would turn off his fast mana, and he exiles my Saga, which that's fine. I would have gotten Grindstone with that. Why not? It's good to have Grindstone just on the board in this matchup. And I'm thinking if I want to discard, and I don't, because I drew Red Blast here. So I've got Magus and Red Blast in hand. And even though I've only got 1 land, that's fine. I've got board presence, and so I make a treasure. And what I consider doing here is getting Needle back and activating Welder, but I actually stop myself because the best weld is a patient weld. Shout out to Tobo in the 90s MTG Discord. We were chatting. He's also a Fable Painter player, and so being patient with your Welder is so important in this deck. I may as well wait for him to do something. I have board position right now. He's at 11, and I'm at 20. So my way of losing, my life is never going to be under siege in this game. And in this matchup, right? That's just not how Blue Painter operates. They're very combo focused. So if they're ever going to beat down, it's going to be with giant Saga tokens, constructs. So I swing for 7 again. And drop him. He blocks part of it, and he Force of Wills my Magus, and I Pyroblast it, and he scoops it up. So I win game 2 off of the power of Welder and Engineer. For game 3, I really should have brought the Furies in, and I didn't. But I've got Magus and Spirit Guide. I've got lands, and I've got a Welder and a Spell Bomb. So I've got a few attack vectors here. So that's totally fine. I'll keep this hand. I just don't have protection for the Welder. So that's the only downside. I'll try... One of the things I try to do is, at least if I'm going to try to play around something, he plays Spell Bomb and Opal and passes. So he doesn't have Metalcraft. He doesn't have blue mana. So I'm going to jam the Welder because he literally must have Force of Will. And if he doesn't have Force of Will, then I'm in good shape. And I also can run out of Magus next turn. So if he does counter Welder, I destroy his Saga, and that's fine also. So here, I'm in pretty good shape. He's got an Aether Spellbomb. He's got Opal and Lotus Petal, but he didn't play a second land, which is really important to pay attention to. So I'm going to play my Great Furnace and just cast the Nile Spellbomb. There's no reason for me to run out. I could have considered running out Magus, but I wanted... I'm not really sure why I didn't run out Magus. I guess I could have. I more was focused on like controlling the graveyard and such. So here he bounces Welder with Spellbomb, and he puts something in his graveyard, and I immediately swap his Mox Opal for his Aether Spellbomb, basically destroying a land or a mana source of his. So now with Saga, he's forced to search, and he did bounce the Welder, so he doesn't necessarily need the Needle at this point, and his mana is definitely under siege. He hasn't played a land, and it's been, I guess it's been 2 turns so far. This is his 3rd turn. So he would know if he drew a land here, but he's going to be Mana Light, right? He's got 1 floating and the Petal. And so he's going to be in a bit of me controlling his graveyard like that, which is very important. He goes and gets Soul Guide Lantern or casts it with his mana floating, and he gets rid of his Opal. So now his graveyard is artifact free. It's one of the important things when you're facing Welder, even in the mirror, is to control what's in your graveyard. Make sure you have good things in your graveyard and not bad things. So I play 1 Welder, and he's like, yeah, sure, but I drew another Welder. So now I play that one. And so he tries to Metallic Rebuke it, and I snap Spirit Guide Red Blast. So I was able to protect them and do that surprise. Now I've got 2 Welders. He can bounce 1, but in general, they're just going to sit there. Now, I think this is the point where Rockford has drawn the Plague Engineer. He literally just needs a land, right? And you can see me pacing back and forth at the top screen, sort of. Because if he plays a land, I don't know that he has Plague Engineer, but this is why you want to bring in Fury, because that thing has to get killed. Plague Engineer on Goblin is very good against us, especially if you are like this kind of artifact heavy deck. Getting rid of Welder is a massive priority. He passes it back to me. I drew Sokinzan this turn, and so I channel Sokinzan to start applying pressure. Because he has a Soul Guide Lantern and an Aether Spellbomb. And he has 1 permanent mana, sort of, and a temp mana. So he doesn't really have a lot going on. So I can start to apply pressure. Because that's literally the first damage that I've dealt on turn 4 the whole time. So Red Painter wants to kill with damage in sideboard, and Blue Painter still wants to use combo. So that's why like Red Painter is generally so favored because of Welder and having 6 main deck Red Blasts. But the Red Blasts don't really counter anything that important. Hercules, I guess, if they play that. But otherwise, they just play a bunch of draw spells and Force of Will and other forces. So really the nastiest thing they have is the combo, which if we don't have Painter on blue, we can't counter it. One of the things that I've really not liked or that I've not loved about Karn is that it does force you to sacrifice 2 sideboard slots, and those are 2 slots where you normally put a Braid or Fiery Confluence. You use Karn as your artifact hate spell, essentially, and you cut them from your board. So I have missed having artifact answers, but I mean, I'm like 15-2-1 with Karn in my last 18 matches or something. It's ridiculous. So I'm not going to stop what I'm doing. It's clearly working, and I'm having fun with it. So, yeah, deck's running real hot right now. Rockford still hasn't found a land. He plays a Shadow Spear, and I'm still able to keep beating down. I find a 3rd Welder. So now I've got 3 Welders. 2 of them are ready to go. I just need an artifact in his graveyard, and I can start like causing total havoc. So he draws, and he plays Emery. And I'm like, please put an artifact in the graveyard. and he puts a bauble and a petal, and passes the turn, and I immediately just eat that up. And so I swap his opal for the bauble, essentially giving him a draw, which I'm okay with. He sacks it and sees Goblin Engineer. Without going to the turn again, I'm now going to swap his petal for bauble. And now I'm basically giving him 0 mana sources before my turn starts. He'll have 0 mana up. He will get to draw 2 cards if he wants to sack Bauble here. So he sacks Bauble right away, and he's just going to draw 2. I go to my turn. So I have Magus in my hand. That was one of my earlier draws that I forgot to call out. And I've got now the Engineer. And so I've been holding Magus this whole time because he didn't have any lands. So there was no reason for me to jam it. So I'm going to jam it here. And what I'm guessing is happening here is that Rockford drew a non-basic. And so he's like, I need a Force of Will that. And now it opens me up to get it to cast Engineer. So even though, like, I just wanted to double spell, and Engineer now goes and immediately fetches Defiler. And just like this matchup classically does, I've got 3 Welders, so why not? I may as well start wreaking havoc. He sacks Soul Guide Lantern to try and exile the Defiler. And I hit the Furnace. Now, it's really important that you hit your lands first. And in this case, not the Spell Bomb or if you had Soul Guide Lantern, because what's so critically important is that I can sacrifice Spell Bomb and put an artifact back in my yard to protect Defiler. So he finds an island and he tries to bounce the Defiler, and I exile his graveyard. And now I use my 3rd Welder to save the Defiler, get another trigger, and I blow up his Shadow Spear. So now it's like turn 6 or something, and Rockford has an island. And that's the power of Chaos Defiler. It's also the power of having 6 abysmal draws on Rockford's side and never finding land. So he is at 9 now. I've got... if I bring Defiler back in, I did play a Great Furnace. So he runs out Soul Guide Lantern, tries to hit Defiler, and I save it with, again, the Great Furnace again. If he tries to do anything to the Defiler, I can swap it again with the Spell Bomb, so really handy. But I've got Lethal, and so this is, again, he had some really bad draws, but it was so good to play against Rockford. Like, just some... like generally interesting games, especially game 1. He like played flawlessly and maximized on my mistakes. And that's exactly what Blue Painter has to do, is like hit those edge cases and they will end up just fine. But I managed to get lucky and survive. And so, yeah, I'm 5-0 now in the league. I'm running really, really well, but I've had good matchups. So I'm not really gonna... I think the deck is so good. I honestly think it's the best deck in Legacy. I really, really do. It's just Painter hasn't been reprinted. So, yeah. In general, also remember, like, I think cutting Fable is best in your sideboard, mostly because they have Force of Negation and Fable's a 3-drop. It does do a lot of great things, and you don't have to shave all of them, but just trimming them down on the play for things like Magus or on the draw for Fury is really good, because if he did find a land in those crucial turns, he would have cast Plague Engineer, and I would have probably lost the game. It's just hard to determine whether he would have found more land or not, and what I was doing. So it really close games for sure, like close in the sense that if one thing had changed, it's a whole different story. So anyway, thanks everyone so much for watching. I hope you're enjoying these games. I'll try to upload some more this week. Yeah, be well. Thanks. Bye.